Have you ever wondered how to make handles for mugs? Well, you're in the right spot. In this week's video, I'm going to show you how to make handles in 3 different ways, from beginner to intermediate to advanced. So if that's something that you want to see, stick around and find out how we do it. Now, while we get the mug ready to trim, we're going to make our handles. And whenever you make mugs, I always recommend you throw your piece first. As that's drying, you work on your handle. And after you're done with your handle, then trim your piece, because you do need your handle to be a little drier before you get it attached to your mug. And so we're going to be doing that right now. And I'm going to do it at the Pottery wheel because this has the best lighting in the studio. And I have this cheap MDF board that was actually packaged with our Pottery wheel that we bought. So we're going to be using this as our table to make the coils for the handles and to do the actual technique. And so the clay that I have, I wedged about 1.5 pounds, and this is more than enough clay to make your handles. And whenever you make your handles, it's always good to have a little more than what you think you need, because you're just going to be cutting off pieces and then forming it and then putting it on the side. And so whenever I make a mug, I usually make maybe 10% more handles than I need. So if I have like 10 mugs, I make 11 handles or so on, because sometimes the handles don't look well. So if the handle looks weird, always make more. But anyway, I got my 1.5 pounds of clay. I'm going to go ahead and cut this into thirds so that I can use this to make my 3 different types of handles. All right, so let's take our clay. We'll cut off the first third, and then second and third. Hopefully this is right in the center. And now each one should weigh around about 0.5 pound of clay. All right, so for the first handle, I'm going to use the least amount because this is the easiest. So we'll put these on the side. And for the first handle, we are using a slab that we're cutting it into size. So you just take your handle and you're going to want to just kind of squeeze it roughly into the handle shape, or at least width you want first. And then we're going to thin this to how thick you want your handle to be. And so it's really helpful at this stage to have objects that you can use as guides to make sure that the handle is the same thickness. But if you don't have those, you could potentially just kind of tap it with your hands until you get roughly the thickness, or you could throw it on the table. So this is called throwing a slab. And as I throw it, I want it to hit the table first on one side, and then the momentum will stretch the clay out. Okay, but I prefer getting it nice and even, so I have some paint sticks and rolling pins to get this to the exact thickness that I want. So in our studio, we have a lot of paint sticks, and these are used to create height and guides for our slabs. Now, these larger paint sticks are about 1/4 inch thick. So if I take a rolling pin and I roll this until it hits the board, or sticks in this case like this, it's hitting. Right in here it's not hitting. Then I have a slab that's the perfect thickness, even all the way through at 1/4 inch. These smaller ones are 1/8 of an inch. And so if I stack them on top of each other, then I get this weird thickness that I really like for handles. But if I double these larger sticks and I put 2 on each side, then I get 1/2 inch. And I think that's a little too thick. So I will use the 1/4 inch plus 1/8 of an inch. So for any of you math people, then you can go ahead and in the comments write how thick that is. Honestly, I wish this was in centimeters, and I wish I used centimeters because it would be so much better than weird fractions. But anyway, when I roll it, I basically start from the middle and I roll towards me. Then I start from the middle and I roll away from me. And my goal is to keep rolling this until the roller is touching the wood at all times. And I just go back and forth. And as the clay gets kind of stuck on the surface, I can peel it away. You can see it's really wet, it's getting stuck there. Flip it over, and if you want, you can move to a drier spot so that it can continue to stretch. And I shouldn't stretch too much more. Okay, and then we'll do that one more time to make sure that this is the nice even thickness from end to end. Okay, there we go. So it's about 3/8 for those math people. I figured it out. Now, from here, you basically just cut this to the shape that you want the handle to be. And so you can make templates. You could just do a strip like this and have it straight. It's really up to you. So for the first example, I'm just going to use this as the guide. And then I just take my needle tool. So dirty. And then I just angle it towards me. And then I just pull until this is cut away. And then I repeat that on the opposite side. So make sure it's lined up. Make sure it's angled towards me, not to the left, not to the right, because that's going to give you a weird bevel cut. And then you just pull. And then you just got to cut your ends, or round your ends. And then you just got to round the corners next. But basically, this is roughly a slab handle. And then from here, let's say this was my clay wall. You just shape this to how you want your handle to be. So actually, I'm going to cut this end off to make it straight. And so you could have your C shape. You could have your half heart or ear shape. You can make this into whatever you want. However, I'm not a big fan of these really straight cuts, so I like using a wooden knife to make it a little more round and more tapered. And you can use whatever tool you want, but I like the wooden knife. And so every wooden knife is slightly different. This one has a slight taper. It's wider on one side, thins out on the other. And so it really depends on your mug shape, your mug size, but I like this one. So I'm going to go ahead and use this as my template. I already have a nice straight cut here. I just got to continue the straight cut on this side. So at the very bottom, I'm going to go ahead and do a nice round cut. And then I'm going to go ahead and start slicing this all the way up. And right here, this changes. So I want to make sure I don't follow that cut and make a weird angle. I'm just going to elongate that, following that same line from start to finish to get a nice taper from wide to narrow. So I think this looks a little more elegant, in my opinion. And then I just got to round the corners. So I take a sponge, and then I just soften these corners. And as you can do as much or as little as you want. I like them nice and round. So kind of adding moisture, compressing the corners away. It will stretch the clay out a little bit, which is totally fine because this is a little on the thicker side. You can afford to make this slightly thinner. But just by rounding it, it just makes this look a little more finished. And then I flip it over and I repeat the same thing on the bottom. Add water, compress, and round. Okay. Now I can do a little more over here, but I'm not here to make this perfect because this is just a demo. So I'll take these extra pieces, kind of put on the side, and then for drying this, you want to bend it roughly in the shape you want it to be. So in this case, I want it to be a half heart. And I'm going to cut this to size later. So if you do want to stand it up, because it can dry a little faster, you can start the bevel cut here by cutting this at an angle, because this is how it's going to attach to the clay wall. And just turn it so that it basically start drying in this shape. Now this will sag a little bit, so if you don't want that, you can leave it sideways, and this will dry out nicely. So I'll put this on the side. Leave it right here. And then we're going to go ahead and do the second method. So this is the easiest. This is the slab method. Let's do the second method, which is called the carrot. So let's get our clay. And we have two more. And I'm going to save the heaviest one for the last one, which is pulling a handle, the more traditional way. So I'm going to use this one for the carrot method. And we'll take these sticks because we no longer need them. And I am going to need a container of water, so I'm going to leave that on the side. And for the carrot technique, it's called a carrot because you're going to transform your clay roughly into a carrot. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of tap it, kind of get this weird like nugget shape or turd shape. And I'm going to start squeezing it with my hand to get this carrot-esque shape and form. And once I kind of get this into that carrot shape, I can roll it in my hands to make it a little more even. I'm going to put it on the table, and I'm going to go ahead and start rolling it to make it a little more even, a little more refined. Now, it's okay as you roll if it starts flattening out like how mine's is, because I'm actually going to flatten it out even more. But if you don't want it flat and you want it round all the way through, you turn it, push down on the flat side, then you give that side a little twist to create a spiral, and then you do light pressure until it rounds out. But like I said, I don't need it perfect, but if it does flatten out on you again, rotate it, push, and repeat until you get a nice round edge. Now, it may keep flattening because you're having this taper occur, and it's really hard to get a round form when it tapers, but you can try your best. But I'm going to focus on this section here. So technically, I don't need this, and I could cut this off and use that for a second handle if I need, or in this case, a third. So I like this thickness here. I'm going to cut this off here. So we'll save this. So I can use this in case I mess up for another handle. All right, so I got my carrot. I'm going to kind of even it out a little more. I like the roundness. And let's say you like this shape. It's perfectly round. You want a nice round handle. You could just start shaping this roughly to how you want it to be. And if you imagine this is your clay wall, that would be your handle, or even rounder. That could be your handle, and you just cut it and let it dry out like the first one. But I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to refine it a little bit, get a little more thin and elegant. So I take the coil, or the carrot in this shape, carrot in this case, and I pick it up, and I toss it down to create a flat surface. And I'm going to do that one more time. Just make sure if you do it twice, you don't miss. And from here, it's kind of like a hybrid of a pool. I'm going to use my container of water, and I'm going to use my sponge, and I'm going to start to pull this and get this a little more flat, a little more refined. And you can see that I'm picking it up every once in a while so that it doesn't get stuck to the wooden board. So when you do this, make sure you don't do it on a very tacky surface like plastic or stone, because this will get stuck really fast. All right. After you add some water, you can have some water on your fingers to kind of refine it. And this is to get the taper that you want, the thickness that you want, the width that you want. So you do as much or as little as you envision. And so you can see that it's thinner here, it increases in thickness. It's wider here, it decreases in thickness. And so you do this to the top. If you want to do it to the bottom, you can do that as well. And this is a nice alternative to pulling a handle, which we'll see next, because it's almost the same, but it's an easier method because you're using the table to kind of help you maintain the thickness because you're working on one side and then the other. Okay, now the clay is very wet, so then you put it on its side, you bend it roughly into the shape that you want, and then you can cut off the excess. So I don't know how much I want yet, so I'm going to give myself quite a bit. And so like the other handle, we can stand it up if you want and let it dry a little more evenly. So you can see my two handles so far. Or you can lay it down and let it dry out like that. So whichever method and drying you want, you can take care of that. So I got my two. And now let's do the more traditional one, pulling a handle. And so I'm going to put these on the side. I can always use this for later. And I got my last piece. So the setup to pulling a handle is the same as the carrot technique. The only difference is instead of pulling and using the table, we're going to hold it up in the air and we're going to pull it downwards. And so I'm going to take my clay, same setup, I'm going to tap it, and then kind of pinch and squeeze to get this into a longer carrot shape. You can put it on the table if you want to kind of even it out. And then we're going to go ahead and start the pulls. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that we have more area to see. And I'm going to change the camera to a point of view so you can kind of see how it looks like in my eyes. All right, so I got everything set up. I cleared the area because I need a little more elevation to do the pulling of the handle. And so I got my clay. It's ready to start pulling. I got a container of water, and I'm going to get my hand wet and start pulling this down to get this refined. Now when you pull, normally you want this over a container of water so that as you pull, all the liquid and messiness goes in. But because of my setup and I don't really want to create a new setup that's bigger, I'm just going to go ahead and put it off to the side. And so I'm left-handed, so I want to use my left hand to then pull this to get it refined. My right hand is going to hold the clay up here, and this is enough to make 2 to 3 handles. So I'm going to show you how to make one. So the first thing you do is get your hand wet, and then you just get your clay wet. So you kind of get this nice and hydrated so that it's slick. So kind of like throwing, you always want this shiny. And then you just take your hand, dip it back in the water, and then you start the pull. And so as I'm pulling, I'm making this hand shape. And as I pull going down, this kind of tightens a little bit to contour to the shape. Now, as I'm closing it, I'm not increasing the pressure. I'm keeping it nice and light, and I'm letting repetition slowly elongate this and get this a little more refined. And as I pull, I'm then rotating this front and back so that the same hand shape isn't going over the same spot over and over again, because then it's going to morph to this. Rather, if I rotate, it kind of makes it a little more even. So let's go ahead and start the pulls. And then pulling on this side, then I rotate. And as you get used to this technique, you can increase the amount of pressure you're pulling. You could just kind of focus on one spot like this, but I like doing the whole thing to get the taper nice and even. And as you can see, now the clay is stretching quite a bit, and you're basically going to keep doing this until you get the length that you want and the thickness that you want. So you can see all the way around, it's a nice round handle. And as you pull, you may notice that towards the tail end, it gets a little thicker because as you pull, it kind of catches and then your hand kind of releases. So this might rip off eventually. And if you don't like it, you can easily just pinch it off and then just continue. So right now, it actually feels a lot better. Over here feels a little thin, so I'm going to focus on this spot to kind of elongate that. And then you more or less have your handle shape. So you can just cut this off, and then you can use this as your handle and you get the shape. But I like flattening this. So what I do is I make a peace sign, and then I kind of pinch the clay like this, and I just move down. Or you can just do it this way if that's easier. And I like creating a little flat surface. So I pinch, and then I straighten, pinch, straighten, and then after I get this flat, more or less, on two sides, I like getting my left thumb and creating a little groove in the center to add a little more of that handmade feel. And you can do this as much or as little as you want. And so right there, I have my nice elongated coil. So then I can lay it down, and I can get my tool that I use to cut it, whichever that may be. In this case, I can use a paint scraper. And I just cut and I slice straight down. And then if I wanted to, I could use this and I could start pulling another coil, another handle from it. So you can see that you can pull very, very quick handles like this once you get the hang of it. Oh, I got a little messed up right there. I got a little wonky, but I'm just going to keep pulling to make it a little more even. Just pinch that off. So you can see I'm a little nervous. I'm trying to do this really quick. Right, there we go. That one's a little better. And this one I'm going to keep round instead. So just keep rotating. Okay, there we go. And then I just pop this off. And then I slice this one next. And of course, I'm not going to use the whole length. I would cut this to size. But basically, all this extra clay, I could potentially knead it up and make more handles if I wanted to. But we'll put this on the side. And let's get all our handles back to take a look at what they all look like. All right, here are the two handles I just made by doing the pulling. And so for the curved handle, the one in the indent, I like having that on the exterior, the outside. So then I would bend it going this way. So I'll let that kind of set. I'll cut this at a nice bevel. So bend it to the shape that I want. And I'll cut this corner off. And I'll stand this up. There we go. And it's slightly off. You see it's kind of tilted, so I can redefine that. And I'll do the same thing on this. Bend this to the shape that I want. And these are pretty wet, so you don't have to cut it right now. You can wait till they get a little drier, especially because we added so much water to it. But that way you can at least visualize what they'll look like. All right, and then we have the carrot handle by pulling it on the table, and finally the slab handle. So from the top down view, you can see a little wider, a little more blocky, a little more rounded, and these ones are a little more defined, and I think I prefer these. But you can see they go from easy to medium to advanced. And I'm going to be cutting these and refining them once I get them attached to my mug. And I'm going to be using this one because this one's my favorite. But you can see the different styles of making them. We have the slab method, we have the carrot method, and then we have the pulling method. So hopefully you liked what you see, and you can pick and choose which one that you want to learn. Now, I recommend as a teacher to learn the pulling method because this gives you the most flexibility, and the more you do this, the easier it becomes. But if this scares you or you do it and it's not really working for you, I would try the carrot method because it's a good lead-in. And if you're just really lazy, slab doesn't hurt. So we'll get these dried out, and then we're going to go ahead and trim our mug. And then hopefully by then, these are the perfect dryness so that we can get it attached. We can let this dry out in front of a fan for about 5 minutes. It'll get really quick, and it'll dry out really quick, but you just got to be monitoring it so it doesn't dry out too much. So we'll go ahead and put this on the side, and we'll go ahead and get the mug going. And there we go. We've made the 3 different handles. In next week's video, we are finally going to finish the mug. I'm going to size them up by cutting them and getting them attached. So don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see that video when it's released. And I want to say a big mahalo to all of the Mud Club members. I hope you are accessing that Google document with all of the videos in a nice and organized location. And if you would like to become a Mud Club member, take a look at the description. It has all the information that you need and all the perks that you will be eligible for. But until that video rolls out, have a great day, and I hope to see you in the next video.